always makes me think of Quincy Jones and how in an interview I heard him say, the interviewer said, "Hey, you leave a lot of space in your arrangements, don't you?" And he said, "Yes." If I remember correctly, he said, "Yes, I leave about a third or 30%. And that's for God to walk around in." I just thought that was just so beautiful.
Beautiful.
Because space invites you and the listener to absorb what has been played, to react to it, and it allows your brain as an improviser and also the audience to digest it and develop a hunger for the next note. Whereas if you fill up the entire space with notes, then there's no, it's too much. At least that's my personal preference. So I think the space, just in a conversation, you have to, if you leave silences, it gives time for the other person, for you, to think about what's just been said and where does that lead you, rather than filling it up with more words.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Inside Edge podcast about how breakthrough insights are generated. My name is Vivek Banerjee. I'm the founder of the company Inside Dojo and the author of the book Inside Edge. In this series, I talk to leading scientists, artists, writers, musicians, business leaders, and creative thinkers on insight. Today is a topic which is very close to my heart. It is insight as improvisation. And the origin of this idea is that in the last 2 years, as a jazz piano student, I have played a lot of music. I've been attending a jazz school. I have also been playing in various friendly jazz jam sessions and with other people. And in the process, what I've realized is that the act of improvising is very close to how breakthrough insights are generated. So to explore that, I thought I'd get a real jazz musician as a guest in this podcast. And today we are very lucky to have George Whitmore here as a guest, who has a highly polymathic career. He started off as a rock musician. He played for bands like the glam rock band, the Dandies. He's played for Fears and Freeez. Then he went on to be an instructor and a director of a jazz school in Amsterdam. And after all that music, he ended up in McKinsey as a coach and a communication specialist for some time. And then he left that to start his own coaching business. And once again, he's back to being a full-time musician. So welcome to this podcast, George.
Thank you. Hi, Vivek. Nice to see you.
Great to talk to you. So, George, could you talk a little bit about your background? You've gone through different roles. And could you talk about, what made you change from one place to the other? It would be very interesting for the audience.
Well, I know Steve Jobs said you can only join the dots looking backwards, and I don't even know if you can even join the dots looking backwards in my case. So I think that really, so as you rightly said, my career, if you can call it that, has been really had two main focuses: music and communication and leadership in the corporate world. And really, I think it was just really one long improvisation from start to finish, in that there was no strategy or plan. I was just found myself with opportunities and ideas and followed them, and they led me to where they led me to. So I can look back and see a thread around communication, something like that, but honestly, the decisions were more to do with what came across my path and what I was ready for, I suppose.
That's fantastic.
Which is like improvisation.
So, one of the things I really want to talk about is the bulk of this conversation is about insight, insight as improvisation, and almost like a solo as a metaphor for insight. And I want to dig deep into that. And I just want to lay out the structure I want to follow is I want to start by talking about performance, that when you're doing the act of improvisation, then go on to training yourself. How do you prepare yourself to be a good improviser? And finally, I want to understand how do you coach others, and especially since coaching has been such a big part of your life, and both in music and in business. And personally, I've been a beneficiary of that. So these are the kind of three kind of topics I would like to cover. So let's talk about performance first. So could you talk about what is a good solo when you improvise?
Well, I mean, first of all, let's have a big disclaimer because I'm just talking from my perspective. There are
Absolutely.
so many approaches to improvisation and schools of thought and practice, and I'm speaking from my own
Absolutely.
personal starting point, which which is to do with my character, I suppose, and my traits. So I like to improvise within a structure. Um, there's plenty of improvisers who don't have any structure at all, but that's not really my style. What makes a great solo in that, I mean, to me, it's about stories, and I think that's been a theme throughout my whole working life. Actually, is like making sense out of the moment, turning it into a story that captures your attention and the listener's attention, and leads somewhere, and feels somehow satisfying and yeah, and pleasing and maybe surprising. So my solos, or at least the solos I like, tend to build, tend to have some kind of dynamic in them, which leads somewhere and have some surprises in them. And in my case, especially, what is important is that they come from the heart, that there's feeling in them as well, that it's an emotional story somehow, which is hard to put into words, which is why I like making it with music.
That's amazing. And I've had the uh, joy of listening to you many times, and I definitely can see that. And one of the interesting things that I find about your playing is, again, this is my subjective view, that sometimes there are lots of musical patterns in the solos, but they're always, as you say, weaved into a really tuneful story. And that's really interesting. Do you have examples from other musicians of famous solos that you particularly like?
I mean, there are so many. I guess a really, really classic one, and one of my favorites is Miles Davis's trumpet solo in "So What." Is famous on his absolutely brilliant and famous album "Kind of Blue," and he just starts so simply with so much space, and you can feel his. He plays a note and then he pauses, and it's like he's listening to himself and he's thinking, okay, that's interesting. What next? And then an idea comes, and then he lets that rest for a moment, and then another idea. You can really feel the ideas almost germinating during the course of the solo, and especially his use of space and, of course, his beautiful sound make it just an absolutely magnetic and gorgeous solo.
Yes, so this is really interesting because the example you chose, because one of the interesting things about Kind of Blue and So What and the solo you're talking about is that it appeals to everyone. You don't have to be a sophisticated jazz musician to like the intricacies of the solos or the technical aspects of it. You could be a layperson and you feel it, which is why it's such a popular album. And
Mm.
so that's a very interesting example you picked, right?
I think that's a good point. I mean, again, there's such a wide variety of music and of jazz, and I tend to. So my goal in making music now is to create happiness, basically, and that leads me to a certain kind of music, which tends to be appealing But there's plenty of jazz that is more challenging than that, and more respect to that as well. But that tends not to be my particular emphasis. Although it's also fun in a solo to put in some notes and some rhythms that are a surprise and that do jar and create some tension. That's also an interesting thing that happens.
Can you talk about that? Because that's another really interesting element of good solos about, creating surprise. So what are some of the things you said, like playing something that might jar? What are other things that you
Well, I mean, just simply how harmonious or dissonant the notes you're playing are. If you're playing something that is really way out of the key, that then the ears of the audience start to go, what's happening? What's happening? There's chaos happening. This isn't what I thought. This doesn't make any sense. And then the art is to, at a certain point, to bring that back in again. So it's called playing out and playing in. So if you play out, you start to go off into a different key and do all sorts of weird stuff. And then at a certain point, often you will choose to bring that back in again, and then somehow the audience says, "Well, that was an interesting journey. I'm glad we're kind of back on solid ground again." That's a fun thing to do with your solo.
Great. And what about what I've noticed is a lot of jazz musicians, they use rhythm very creatively, right? It's not, going in this metronomic way. People are playing off the beat, before the beat, after the beat, and doing all these really interesting things. Could you speak about that?
Wow. Okay, that's so fascinating because jazz is rhythmically so incredibly precise, and a great jazz musician, and I certainly don't include myself among that by any stretch of the imagination, has got an unbelievable mastery of timing. And what you then have, and this is find so beautiful, is that they then start to stretch the timing in different ways and to kind of play a little bit behind the beat or somehow create what to me feels like an element of human fallibility in it, which of human vulnerability, should I say, which I find so charming and fascinating. It's so lovely that you've got on the one hand this incredible precision, on the other hand that you stretch it a little bit, and it's like people say that music is a microcosm of the world, and the world was it the music is the world in microcosm, and the world is music in macrocosm. In other words, it's a big metaphor for all kinds of things. And this vulnerability, this moments of extreme tension and uncertainty, and then coming back, it's all part of our human experience, and it's uh, so fascinating and so rewarding to be kind of exploring that and sharing that on in a musical dimension.
And and that's such an interesting point that you made. That on the one hand, there's this great need for precision, and then you're kind of breaking that.
Mm.
But it seems to me that you have to constantly, to even break that precision, you have to train yourself to learn how to be very accurate and precise to do it well, because it's not something just randomly happening. Uh, you know, Good musicians are using even that in a very intentional way. Would that be a correct way of saying that?
Well, most certainly, most certainly. There's a great story about James Brown who was rehearsing with his band, and he asked the trumpet player, "What instrument do you play?" And he goes, "The trumpet." He says, "No, not the trumpet." And eventually he says, "I play the drums. You play the drums." And then he goes to the guitarist, says, "What instrument do you play?" And he goes, "The guitar." "No, the drums." And it's like it's all about rhythm and precision, and so whatever instrument you play, you have to really make the music come alive in the jazz genre. In my view, you have to really tie it in to the rhythm, and then you can go do all kinds of things with it. But the basic pulse has to be really in you. Then you're on the same wavelength as everybody else in the band.
Yeah. And the other thing that you said is that your style is that you like to play within a structure. Could you expand a little bit on that?
Yeah, I don't know. I suppose it's to do with again my character, but I find that the having a chord sequence, a song, something that we all know what the basis is. I find that's an essential ingredient for me, really, to feel free enough to float on top of, well, not float on top of it, but to use it as a basis and to expand and to launch ideas from. And in jazz, I mean, it's very standard to have that situation. Everybody's following this structure without variation, but using it as a platform for their own ideas to launch from.
Which is also interesting for different people to do their own thing. You need a common structure or language, right? So,
I mean,
yeah.
yes, I think you do. Yeah, well, I mean, it certainly helps. Yeah.
Yeah, so you've said several things here which are very interesting, and one of the things I wanted to explore, you started talking about space. Okay, you said when you were talking about the Miles Davis solo that he creates a lot of space. Could you speak a little more about that?
Wow, well, this always makes me think of Quincy Jones and how in an interview I heard him say, the interviewer said, "Hey, you leave a lot of space in your arrangements, don't you?" And he said, "Yes." If I remember correctly, he said, "Yes, I leave about a third or 30%. And that's for God to walk around in." I just thought that's just so beautiful.
Beautiful.
Because space invites you and the listener to absorb what has been played, to react to it, and it allows your brain as an improviser and also the audience to digest it and develop a hunger for the next note. Whereas if you fill up the entire space with notes, then there's no, it's too much. At least that's my personal preference. So I think the space, just in a conversation, you have to, if you leave silences, it gives time for the other person, for you, to think about what's just been said and where does that lead you, rather than filling it up with more words.
And it's you allow for the unexpected to happen and the serendipity to also strike. In the words that you just quoted about letting God walk in, right? So,
I mean, it's you mentioned, I know that, but the different, comparing different areas of work is interesting, and this makes me think about coaching conversations as well, where silence is so incredibly important. That you wait as a coach for the coachee to absorb what's been said and to think about it, and you can almost feel their brain turning it over and generating a new thought. And silence is essential for that as well. Maybe there's a parallel there.
yes, yes. So, at this point, before I go on to the next topic, just to let the audience know that we are following a structure. We are talking about performance. We are on performance, and first we are talking about the solo as a metaphor for insight. And hopefully, you've picked up many things that George said that can be described as a way to look at what a good insight might be from what the description of a good solo. For instance, having a story. So it's not just some pattern. Patterns are important, but they have to be woven into a story. He's talked about emotions, moving people. It's about having space. It's about simplicity for everyone to understand. Um, it's about being unexpected. It's about doing innovative things, but always rooting it in the context. So many things I hope people can see, these were some of the salient things that I picked up from what George said, and I'm sure you might have picked up other things. But let's go on to the next part of the performance section. What is the right kind of body mind situation to create good improvisations, right? What would you say is the ideal state where you feel that, yes, improvisations are coming out well, and yeah.
Well, I mean, you have to be present in the moment, and that's the simplest way to say it, I think. There are many thoughts which can get in the way of your performance. Anxiety, thinking about, as a saxophone player, you might think the audience is full of saxophone players who are listening to every note and thinking, why did he play that note and why isn't he playing that note? Such thoughts can really disturb your concentration, if you like. So, performance anxiety, fellow musicians who appear not to be listening, all sorts of things can distract you. But ideally you want to be feeling free, present. You need to be breathing properly, and have your attention on actually your attention floats around a little bit. Sometimes you're thinking about yourself, what you're playing, sometimes you're thinking about the audience, sometimes you're thinking about the band, sometimes you're thinking about the universe. So your consciousness floats around, but essentially you're in the moment and not having distracting thoughts floating past and getting in the way. Yeah.
Again, I think sounds simple, but it's quite a profound truth, I suppose, to be in so present and perhaps relaxed for you to be improvising.
It's really funny how nervous you can get, considering that there's almost nothing at stake when you're standing in a bar, taking a solo with in an open mic session where you almost don't know anybody, and yet you can feel really on the spot. So I think it's actually quite good mental training as well to notice what your thoughts are doing and to find out ways to calm them and to focus on what you want to focus on. Again, it's like life in microcosm. It's like almost like a playing space, a playground where nothing really matters that much, but in a funny kind of way it does.
Yes, and I kind of recall this master class I attended by Michael League, the bass player for, I think it's Snarky Puppies and the band. And he spoke about the need to be completely at ease. So you're present, you're attentive to other musicians. And he said he likes to think of, I think, if I remember accurately, that he likes to play at a 20% capacity of his, max technical capacity, so that creativity comes out and he's really attending to the situation. So it's similar to the idea that you're saying, that you want to create that environment. Could you talk about situations which are not very conducive to that mindset?
Situations that are not conducive to that mindset. I mean, that can be a whole load of things, can't it? But I mean, the first one that comes to mind is if there are, sometimes you have drummers. The drummer's terribly important in those situations. So, as an example, not to pick on drummers, but I'm always trying to really lock into the timing, and I can be confused by drummers who do a lot of tricky offbeats, and also sometimes they listen when a drummer's listening to you in your solo and following the dynamic. It's like you take off into orbit. If they don't, then it's kind of hard work. So of course the other instruments are important as well. Any responsiveness from anybody else in the band to what you're doing is a huge lift. If there's no responsiveness at all, it's like a heavy weight, and you're basically on your own. So I suppose the first thing is, are you feeling on your own, or are you feeling like you're part of something? That will make a big difference. And of course, you've got your own frame of mind. Are you stressed? Are you anxious? Are you tired? Are you nervous? All that kind of stuff makes a difference as well.
And yes, so this is again to the viewers really important point about how we think about the emergence of insights. We want to create an environment where we are present, relaxed, and I'll share one of the examples that or one of the practices that we do at Inside Dojo, and we find it really helpful. So often when we are doing interviews or focus groups, we have clients watching us in the back room. And we've always sent notes to our clients that when you're there, you ought to be totally relaxed, listen to music before you come, read your favorite book, dress in a relaxed way, because you're there to just observe. Because what can happen is there's a team, and suddenly you're there for 2 hours with the CEO next to you, and you might get tempted to impress the CEO and get all your ideas across instead of being in the here and the now. And putting that note really helps everyone. And you have to tell people that this is not a corporate boardroom where everyone's trying to come up with strategies. You're trying to listen to the consumer or the person whomever was being interviewed or the group, and so see their body language, etc. So relaxation is really key, and I think that's one of the big takeouts that I've got from this, and I hope people absorb that. So, getting to the next element of performance, George, I want to talk about working with other musicians. And for me, because this whole participation in jazz jams is relatively new, that was probably the biggest aha moment about, the dynamic with other people whom you don't know and you're playing with. And you learn so much about that. So could you talk about that? How do you kind of work with others so that you're kind of creating great music? What are certain kind of good things to do? What are your tips?
I mean, if you're talking about an open mic situation, then this is musicians who you've never played with before, and
Or even
that's
people
different.
you played with, right? So yeah, so
Yeah,
either way.
yeah. Which I mean, taking that situation first, then to what makes a huge difference to me is having some kind of contact, even if it's just eye contact with those other musicians, so that you get the feeling that you're on the same wavelength. It's interesting your story about people watching and encouraging people to feel free. I think if you're worrying about being judged, then it's a big break on your creativity in any situation. And you start to think, hey, maybe I shouldn't play this note, or maybe I'm not playing enough notes, or maybe I should do something, put in some clever pattern somewhere, or that's you know really going to mess up your flow, obviously. So as far as that goes with other musicians, if you encouraging looks, connecting, if you watch musicians playing, there's so much visually to see about the interactions. You can tell, are they enjoying each other's playing? Are they actually putting up with each other's, what's going on? You get that feeling, and that's extremely important. And I guess if you're playing with your regular band, then there's a whole new set of dynamics that, just like with any team. I mean, this is one thing I noticed when I shifted from the music world into the corporate world, is the incredible number of overlaps in terms of bands and teams. I mean, bands are teams, and it's all about performance. So there are so many parallels. And so if you're working in an actual band, then that is your team. And what's your role? What's your position in relation to each other? How do you encourage each other? All that kind of stuff is really, really important. And a lot of bands ignore that, and I think bands which don't ignore that are certainly, in my experience, more enjoyable to play with, and I think probably perform better as well. Although that's not always the case.
Yes, and I suppose the act of listening to others I've seen is just such big learning, and you find good musicians will listen to you and then they'll embellish what you're playing and make it more beautiful. And I just marvel at that. So I suppose listening to other people and creating a better, enhancing their performance is also perhaps one of the things that comes out, right? It's,
Absolutely. I mean, if I'm soloing and I play a phrase and I hear the pianist pick that phrase up and repeat it, or then that gives me so much more energy in that moment. And of course, sometimes people do listen and sometimes they don't. You can play a whole evening without really listening to anybody. If you do that, then the quality is not going to be that high, but it happens. So it's a choice. It's a choice. Am I really going to listen to people, or am I just going to play the notes and wait for the evening to end?
and then there is this whole, you talked about structure, you talked about accuracy, and during these playing in jazz jams, one of the appreciations that I've discovered is how much I respect the rhythm section, because they maintain the structure, and the bass player and the drummer and the pianist sometimes, and the guitarist, and they keep it so tight, the great musicians, and almost they will make sure that you will not fail, because they are so keeping the truth of the music so tight. Do you feel that? I mean, does that resonate?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You, so I'm a saxophone player, so I'm a soloist. I tend to stand at the front of the stage, and um, people pay attention in a certain way when I'm soloing, but I'm only part of the overall sound and the rhythm section. That's really where it's happening. To me, that's like, in fact, what I'm doing is an optional extra. It floats. It's a nice to have. What they do is it's like the body of the music, the power, the energy that comes from the rhythm section. So yeah, extremely important, of course, essential, absolutely essential, and can make all the difference. Well, do make all the difference.
And I think there's a lot to learn from this experience and translate it into the business world, which is about kind of listening to other people, really listening, because a lot of us can listen when we are doing an interview, but when you're in a brainstorming session or in a problem solving session or just a discussion, to be able to talk, but at the same time, really listen to others and embellish what's happening. I think it's a great sort of practice to work on, because it's one of those skills that I feel that you can just keep getting better at. And the rhythm section analogy is that there are a lot of people who are keeping everything tight, right? So in our work that we do specifically, you might work with an analyst who's doing a lot of statistical analysis iteratively, and it's all, you are reliant on the accuracy of that robust work for you to think about insights. It's your insights, as George said, are not without that. That is providing the foundation. But similarly, there are lots of people who are kind of keeping things together, project management and all. And I think what this teaches you is that you really have to respect all the people who are kind of working behind the scenes for the insights to kind of come out and shape our kind of business outcomes.
You certainly do. You need them. I mean, something that happens that I find quite touching in jam sessions is that if you've got a vocalist, for example, who's not that experienced, and they miss out a line, or they miss out a bar, then the rhythm section will often just seamlessly follow them and say, okay, they won't just plow on and say, oh, they made a mistake, stupid person. No, they say, okay, our job is to give this person a good experience. So, and without even thinking about it, they miss out the bar themselves and fall back in. So there's this generosity and supportive attitude, which is makes the whole collaboration work, because none of us is perfect, and so part of, I think, working together, certainly in musical area, and I guess it's you can make the parallel with any kind of team, is to help a team member when they fall or when they slip or when they need a different kind of direction, that you gently are there for them and provide that, and that you, as a soloist, you know that that's there. That is again a part of the sort of safety that gives you the confidence to be yourself, I think, and generate ideas.
Absolutely. And so that finishes the first section on performance. We talked about what characterizes a good solo, and we took that to what insight is. We talked about what are the conditions that create a conducive mindset for insight. And then we talked about working with teams. That was on performance. Now we'll dive into the next session about how do you train to improvise. So, George, could you talk about, like, what's your practice routine like? What do you do?
Oh, my practice routine. Yeah, I mean, I so I now I'm trying to maintain my technical level rather than continue, although I'm developing it a bit. But so I practice every day. I mean, I'd love to say I practice for 3 hours. I don't. If I practice for an hour, I'm pleased with that. I have a warm up. I play long notes. I play scales with the metronome. I try to increase the metronome tempo all the time, bit by bit, so that I'm staying accurate. I play scales, arpeggios, all kinds of technical stuff, and then I practice playing to backing tracks on jazz tunes, soul, funk, reggae tune. Not so much reggae, but soul, funk, gospel is something I'm really into at the moment. Listen to other saxophone players who I admire, and other musicians, especially vocalists, and try to approach their wonderful level of musicianship. Yeah, so that's my routine. 5 days a week. Weekends I take off.
Okay. But what's interesting to me is, again, you talked about accuracy. Even now, you've had a lifetime of musicianship, and you say you still play with a view to be accurate. And I find it, like, absolutely inspiring that when I hear something like that, you don't take it for granted, right? So
No, but all musicians have to do that. It's a physical thing that as well as a mental thing. You have to stay in shape. I guess I'm not a sporting person, but I mean, sporting people have to do that as well. You have to stay in shape, otherwise it deteriorates. So yeah, that's like keeping fit, I suppose.
and that itself is, I think, a really interesting lesson for most of us, because as we get more experience, we might have this belief in the business world. I'm talking that, for instance, I might think that I don't need to get into the nitty gritties of the project. I can show up in a meeting and I have so much experience, I'll be able to provide wisdom.
Mhm.
But I think
Mhm.
I have to constantly train myself in skills and expose myself and get into the kind of nitty gritties of the discipline to be able
Mhm.
to perform uh, at a
Yeah.
fit level, right? So I think in every field has its kind of equivalent of what is fitness, right? In our world,
Yeah,
yeah.
it's fitness, and it's also learning as well. So the learning mindset, I think, is absolutely crucial. I mean, I'm 70 plus now. I mean, I understand more and more how learning is just absolutely essential to keeping yourself, at least in mind, young, and energetic and alive. I never think like, okay, I don't need to learn anything anymore. That would be crazy. I mean, there's more to learn than you will ever learn. So we're all of us are learning all the time, and it's good to have that mindset, I think.
So on that learning topic, one thing that really um I find interesting about what you've just said and what I know that you play very different genres, right? You've played rock, you've played blues, jazz, Latin, you've experimented with Indian classical, you play gospel. Like, what's the effect of that on your playing?
The effect of playing lots of different, having played lots of different styles. Well, I mean, gosh, that's hard to distill. Let me think about that. I mean, well, you mentioned Indian classical. I mean, honestly, the effect of that was to give me way more humility than I had when I started trying to play that incredible music. It took me not very long to realize that I would never get further than the first few steps of the footpath leading up to this huge mountain of musicianship that Indian classical musicians achieve. So that was actually a really important moment for me in recognizing my own limitations and deciding to work within those limitations. I suppose where I've arrived now is, and this is why I'm so interested in the kind of music I'm playing now, is that I'm not trying, is that I'm really focusing on communicating a message of humanity, a message of warmth, of love, of our common shared humanity, soulfulness, and that involves sound, being careful about sound, the sound I'm making, like a singer. So having a sound that opens people up, that makes people feel alive, and rhythm and space. All these things are very important for that. So I'm moving more and more into pop, soul, gospel. That kind of music is the music that really inspires me now. Yeah.
It's another sort of story that, again, Michael Lee came up with in the same um, masterclass I was talking about. He said that his playing got transformed when he started playing for a black church. And because he said when he was in a music school, he, he whatever was technically more sophisticated was seen as good. So if you played something that nobody else could play, was seen
Mm.
as, wow, that's great stuff. But when
Mm.
he immersed himself in playing in a black church, he said the music was, it's not that it was simple, but the whole kind of goal was to create a more joyful, emotional experience. And that affected his playing a lot. And it was very transformative for him. And so it's really interesting to kind of learn that placing yourself in different contexts, how that might enrich your playing, right?
Yes, absolutely. Most certainly. It clarified a lot of things for me. The people I've been playing with in the last few years, and I'm very grateful for that.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not religious myself, but um, there's something about common humanity and that and the spirituality of us as living beings that connects with music for me, and I'm still coming to understand that more, and it's helpful to think along those lines. Yeah.
Again, there's some other points of diversity that I wanted to probe on. Like you've had a pretty full life in England and in Holland or Netherlands, right? And that's been quite an interesting thing. How does that has that affected your kind of musicianship in any man in any way?
Oh gosh, how's that affected my musicianship? It must. It's affected every aspect of my life, so I'm sure it's affected my musicianship as well. That's a huge question. I mean, anybody who has lived outside the country of their birth for an extended period will know that there's no experience really like it. It changes you in ways that you can't predict and which are not undoable. So I think one of the ways it has affected me is to give me a like an overarching perspective, I suppose you could say, of culture, how that affects you. When you're outside your own culture, you get a different perspective on the culture that you grew up with. Of course, you've got the outsider's perspective on the one that you're in as well. So, so there's that, and there's also you're also you're kind of reinventing yourself. So there are no people don't know what to expect of you. You come from somewhere else, and so there's a kind of freedom in that, in terms of anything you don't have the restrictions and expectations of your home culture around you anymore. So there's a kind of, I suppose, an increased freedom that goes with it. How that reflects on the music side, I think that it gives a certain element of freedom there as well. That you are not restricted by perhaps the expectations or the customs of the culture that you've grown up in. So you do something just because it's you, not because it's expected. That sense, I think, is conducive to creativity. Yes, I think so.
And lots to unpack. One point which I wanted to explore on the diversity point again is we talked about culture, which is at a life level, but something else that I've noticed is that you play lots of instruments, right? You play the guitar, saxophone, I believe, is your main instrument, but you play the guitar, you play the piano. I've heard you play the harmonica, you play the double bass. I've heard you play the drums as well. And what is, how come you kind of played so many instruments? I know other musicians do that, but what I'd like to understand is what's the kind of, how does it help?
I mean, the process for me was I was a guitarist for many, many years, and then I switched to saxophone, and that was because I realized that I was like a blues guitarist, really. I was trying to create this warm, sustained sound, and I realized that actually I could do that much better with the saxophone than with the guitar. So that was the reason that I switched over. In terms of the effect, what's the effect of learning lots of different instruments? I mean, one is that you have a greater appreciation, I suppose, of other instrumentalists in your band, in your orchestra or whatever. That you have a sense of what matters to them, what works for them, what they can do, what is enjoyable for them to do. So that helps you feel part of a team of people doing different things. So that you're. I remember reading that Miles Davis. I think it was during his project with Gil Evans. I'm not sure about that, but anyway, maybe earlier than that. He was playing in a quite a large band, and it was said that he knew everybody's part. He knew everybody's part in that band, and that's quite extreme version. But that kind of sense of granular sense of what is going on around me, who's doing what, I think definitely helps energize and focus your playing and your presence. Yeah, I suppose it's about being present as well. So being aware of what's going on around you in quite a granular way. helps you be in the moment.
Thank you. So we'll go to the next section. And again, the viewers, there was a lot to unpack in this section. And I'm sure when I listen to it again, I'll have many lessons and you will. But there are quite a few things I picked up. One is the need to be training ourselves constantly and practicing and not being complacent because we have whatever got a lot of experience. The value of diversity at various levels, where different genres or disciplines or instruments, the value of cultures in not only enriching our playing and working better with others, but constantly also putting us in this beginner's mind, like George said about when he was working on the Indian classical piece. You're suddenly a beginner again, and you have to be completely humble. And so there are lots of lessons like that, and listen to it for more kind of analogies. But let's move to the third part. We've talked about performance, then we've talked about preparation or training, and now we're going to talk about coaching. And I'll just start by saying, for the viewers, George actually initiated me into jazz, playing jazz, because I'm a really kind of late piano starter. I started playing piano from scratch in my 30s, and then I bumped into George in the McKinsey office. I heard him play something, and I said, I want to listen to you again. And George said, why don't you come to the music room and play? And that's how I got into playing jazz, and then I started improvising, and now it's a part of my life. So I've experienced firsthand the value of George's coaching, and the thing I want to highlight is, and which is why I think it's so important to have him on this kind of podcast, is the lessons that George gave were not musical at all. It was working on me, and I think that's really crucial. And we want to get into how do you approach coaching someone to improvise. So George, over to you. How do you actually think about helping others learn how to improvise?
It's very much like, I guess, like coaching in other fields as well, in that you have to start from where they are and understand, why do you want to improvise? What do you imagine that is? What do you think is stopping you? And removing barriers to it. People often have a lot of limiting beliefs around improvising, that it's very difficult, that it requires a huge amount of musical knowledge, that all kinds of ideas, that they won't be very good at it, etc. And in fact, there are people who really, it's not everybody does or can improvise. I used to think everybody could, but I've had pupils whose musicality is not of that type, and I've understood to respect that as well, rather than think, hey, everybody can improvise. But that's been quite rare, and I suppose starting off by trying to lower the barriers and understand that improvising is just about playing what you can in the moment, even if it's just one note. That's still going to be improvising, and it's still going to have some meaning to it. I think so. It's not only what you play, but how you feel about it, the effect it creates, and so on. So really noticing that. That's going back to the solo, for example, Miles Davis solo, and solos that have space. It's like, have time to think of what's the meaning of this note, what's the effect of it. Let me hear it. What does it do to me? How do I feel about it? So really, again, being in the moment. That's the first thing. I suppose the second thing is just doing it, and providing a situation where the person feels safe, they're not judged, which is ridiculous to judge people. That there's also that I'm curious, I'm interested to hear what they come up with, which I am. So there's something about, and this I suppose is like coaching generally, the mindset of the coach influences or hopefully will influence the growth and awareness of the coachee. If you believe in them, if you encourage them, if you are curious and interested in them, then it has an effect on their overall ability to generate ideas and to try things out, new things, which to me is fascinating, and that's how I do it.
And, this is so, it's reminding me of our first sessions when you began coaching me, because I used to accompany you, and every time I'd make a mistake, you would say, let's go back and do it again. So you weren't letting the mistake persist, but the way you approached it was quite non-judgmentally. It was just saying, just let's do it again. And I think that's how I started learning, and that built up my confidence because I felt not judged. At the same time, it wasn't that you were letting me make mistakes, right? So, I mean, that's such an interesting thing about kind of removing these, what you call the self-limiting barriers. And because I've had the other experience of once having a kind of music singing teacher who, if I'd sing one note off, would say, "Oh, she could say," and say, "Why can't you relax then?" And so after that, you're so paranoid, you can't produce even, even a note that you could produce. You're doubtful. Like, so it's really interesting what you're talking about, this whole confidence building, right? So, and
That's so interesting that you describe and demonstrate the physical thing that happens to you, because I think at the heart of a lot of this is the the illusion that our mind and our body are separate. They're
yeah,
not, and so if our body is tense, then we can't be creative, and so working on someone's physical state through relaxation, through giving, through whatever means, breathing, is such an important part of allowing them to, or helping them to flourish and grow, I think, and learn.
yes. And which gets me to another kind of interesting point about, and I don't know if you saw my first podcast where I was interviewing Robert Root Bernstein, and he was highlighting the importance of having embodied knowledge, right? Even in things like physics. And he gave an example of a friend who was top class in physics, but could not apply it on very simple problems in the real world. And music, as you say, is such a kind of bodily sort of experience. It's such a connected experience. How do you kind of help people develop this sort of intuition of the senses, and so that they get the intuition first and don't kind of pack themselves with theory?
I mean, I don't think you can necessarily tell people that, but at least my way of doing it is experiential. So in actual classes, in lessons, because I taught saxophone for many, many years in this music school in Amsterdam, and a lot of the people who came to me were adults who wanted to improvise and express themselves. That was also the nature of the school, was about helping people express themselves, be creative, not just technically learn how to play an instrument, but really, there was that side of it was an important part of the whole approach of the school, the Muziekpackhuis in Amsterdam. Still going, founded by Fred Cohen, an extremely insightful drummer. So it's about experiential. So when you're with a group or with an individual student, giving them a task to do, and responding, listening carefully and responding, sensing, are they tense? Are they Are they? Is this a moment when they suddenly relax and let something happen? If so, respond to that and encourage that, so that they start to learn themselves and become mindful of their own processes. Like, oh, now I'm feeling tense, so I can learn. Let me learn to let go of that. So it's a lot about self-awareness, learning how you work yourself, what your inner mental state is, observing that, etc. So I don't think it's so much about you can tell people the theory of that, but I think that it's very hard for people to change without some kind of experiential reinforcement
Yes.
as well.
And one of the interesting things, we've talked about space before, and one of the things I learned from you is I used to kind of rush headlong into playing the solo whenever I'd come and I'd keep playing lots of notes and then, feel slightly out of control. And you said that you have to be comfortable with not playing and creating space, and also not playing the right hand and left hand together all the time. And the other thing you said is you have to be comfortable repeating ideas, not think that you have to play something new all the time, right? And in fact, repeating will help anchor the music. And these things were very interesting for me. So,
It's interesting that pe- there's the notes that you play and there's the meaning that they have. And sometimes it feels like people are playing notes and they don't have any meaning. They're
right.
just playing notes. And I think that happens quite a lot, especially, I mean, I'm sure I know I've done that myself, especially if you've been doing a lot of technical practicing and you basically produce on the stage what you've been practicing, which fits but has no actual intention behind it, particularly. Is that there's a huge difference, qualitative difference between that kind of playing and playing in a way that actually communicates something. And again, that's a matter of your own mental state, whether you're focusing on doing that, whether you're connecting with the band, whether you're connecting with the audience, and learning to recognize, having this observer mindset. I mean, mindfulness practice is very helpful for this, to notice what's happening inside your awareness,
Yeah.
and to manage that is very helpful, I think.
Again, uh, we talked about coaching, and this is again a big topic. And we heard some of the essential things like removing limiting beliefs, learning, giving people the experience of learning rather than just transmitting information, building confidence, allowing people to have space. These are very directly relevant because in our world, sometimes we can get into this situation that we have to fill our brains with all kinds of information and data and not take the space to understand what's meaningful. And the other thing that struck me in Inside Dojo, we've had people who've joined and they didn't come with a very quantitative background, or they had a very quantitative background and were afraid of qualitative work. And most of the times, you find that people can learn a lot more. A qualitative person can do a lot of very good quantitative work, and vice versa. I mean, one of my colleagues was a hardcore quant person. I'll mention her name, Jenny, and she became one of the best moderators. I mean, one of the best qualitative moderators. And so it's really what we sometimes kind of assume these things about people. We assume these things about ourselves, and we can actually make a lot of progress if we have the right environment, the right coach. And so I think those were some of the important lessons. So that's where we've kind of covered jazz as a metaphor for insight. We talked about performance, we talked about training, and now we talked about coaching. Let's get back to you, George. Uh, I wanted to ask a few questions. Like, you've moved across different fields, and I know you said that can you join the dots, but can you offer any lessons on people who are making these switches? How do you adapt to different environments, like from going from a place like you're in a music school and then you're teaching at McKinsey, right? Or you're coaching and a communication specialist at McKinsey, and then you become a coach again. How do you do that? What are some tips?
I mean, so my tips for that are first of all to dare to dare to try things. I mean, that just goes back to when I was learning, I had been learning saxophone and started thinking I wanted to play in a band and going to auditions and being absolutely convinced that that after only playing for a minute that the band would say, "What are you wasting our time for? Go back and learn how to play your instrument." When in fact they said, "We love you. Please join the band." Those are moments where you think, "Wow, I'm so glad I took that step because I was absolutely convinced that was not going to happen." Um, so it's something like having confidence in yourself and try it is the first thing. I so recommend that. You can stay stuck in one place forever by thinking, "Well, I won't, it's not for me. I'm not right for that." Try things. It doesn't matter if they say no, but you'll be really, really surprised. And the second thing is that the biggest step for me was moving to McKinsey because it worked. I moved into a world I really was not had almost no experience in at all, the corporate world, and there was so much new to learn. Couple of things there. First of all, the team, the wonderful team that I joined, said to me, "The only mistake you can make, George, is not to ask questions." That was such a fantastic tip, and I really did ask a lot of questions. That helped a lot. I felt very very supported. So make sure that you feel supported. And secondly, have confidence in their selection process and in your own abilities. For example, one of the first things I had to do was rehearse a group of very senior partners who were preparing for a very important meeting. And I was supposed to observe my experienced colleague do this, but he couldn't make it. So I suddenly, after a very short space of time, found myself saying, "I'm supposed to rehearse these people, and I know nothing at all, about what they're doing." And actually, I settled in, and I realized that what I learned from teaching musicians, for leading bands, and so on, was incredibly useful. I could hear who was talking, who was not talking, what was the nature of each, what was the energy coming from all the different people, where were, all of the dynamics, all of that was actually very clear to me. So I realized that I had a lot of knowledge which was transferable that I hadn't particularly anticipated. So a lot of knowledge is transferable more than you think. So that's again, believe in that and go with it. Those are the two things that I learned. And thinking like, "I'm never going to do this. It's never going to work," is not helpful, really. Of course, we're all human, but it's a kind of theme that will probably continue to play somewhere in the background forever, but it doesn't have to affect what you actually choose to do.
Thank you. That's really helpful. And my last question is, now you've decided to go back into music in a big way and playing live music. Could you talk about what's your kind of aspiration there and what's kind of led you to that?
When I started again, my goal was to create happiness. I'm not sure if what I feel. That is still a goal, but I that's become a slightly deeper goal for me now, and it's very much to do with humanity. And I feel like, especially in this age where so much of our experience is becoming digitalized, basically, and we spend a lot of time connected, like we sort of are now. Uh, Through screens, that there's a risk that we forget a lot about what it is that makes us human. I actually think that's quite a serious risk, and my answer to that is only a small answer, but I do think it's a valuable one, which is live music can never be digitalized. The experience of playing together and being in the same space as musicians playing music is something that is visceral, is human, is physical. It involves all our senses. It's and therefore it's got an intrinsic value, which I think is vast. So I'm trying to spend more and more time actually playing with people, in front of people, with that intention of creating moments where this connection happens. I feel very deeply that that's essential right now.
That's just a fantastic sort of decision, and very highly sort of appreciated. And I hope you'll be able to share some link that I can put with this podcast where people can find where you're playing so that we can all show up and enjoy the music and meet. So, George, I said that was my last question, but it struck me that this whole conversation's about music. So, can I request you to play something briefly for the audience?
Yes. Okay. All right. Let me get the old saxophone out. Let's see. Okay. Here we go.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Thank you. Thank you. There'll never be another you, right?
Yeah, will definitely never be enough.
No, thank you. So,
Yeah.
George, thank you so much for this. And viewers, you heard George and this interview. I hope you enjoyed it and learned a lot from it. I certainly did. And if you enjoyed this, please like this podcast, share it, and subscribe to it. Thank you, and goodbye until next time. Bye-bye.